Good evening and welcome to the Monday on November 6th meeting of the Planning Commission, Wayzata Planning Commission. I now call the meeting to order. My name is Larissa Stockton. I'm chair of the commission, and I have just a few words about how to participate. So we have a meeting ID tonight of 858-6682-3880, passcode 745616. Members of the public may attend the Planning Commission meeting in person or watch and listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8 WCTV and the city's website at wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting in advance or by logging into the Zoom call, raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you'll be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel. You'll be asked to unmute, and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and address. The city encourages comments or questions about items on the agenda, and when possible, requests that you submit them in advance by emailing publiccomment@wayzata.org, calling city staff at 952-404-5323, or mailing them to Wayzata City Hall at 600 Rice Street, East Wayzata, MN 55391. Attention, public comment. Right. Roll call. Next on the agenda, we can take the roll. Dr. Gellner?
Yes. Commissioner Schwalbe?
Here, present.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Here.
Commissioner Douglas?
Here.
Chair Stockton?
Here.
Commissioner Merriam?
Here.
Commissioner Severson?
Here.
And Commissioner Elg?
Here.
Thank you,
Great.
Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of this evening's agenda. Does anybody have any questions or proposed changes to the agenda? And if not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved, Schwalbe.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwalbe. May I have a second?
Second, Miriam.
Thank you, Commissioner Merriam. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the agenda for this evening is approved. Next, we have the approval of the consent agenda. This evening consent agenda consists of two items. We have the approval of the meeting minutes of October 2nd, 2023, and B, the approval of the Planning Commission report and recommendation of approval for the rear yard setback and impervious surface variances at 223 Gleason Lake Road. Does any commissioner have any questions or comments on any item on the consent agenda or wish to pull an item for further discussion? If not, can I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved, Schwalbe.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwalbe. May I have a second? Someone new?
Second, Elg.
Thank you, Commissioner Elg. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the consent agenda is approved. Right. Next, we have tonight's public hearing items. This evening, we have one, which is to consider the application for PUD amendment and shoreland residential PUD/CUP at 825 Mill Street East. Community Director Gellner, please walk us through.
Yes, Planner Quarles will provide the presentation this evening.
Thank
Chair
you.
and Commission.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight we'll be talking about an application at 825 Mill Street East, going by Mill Street Flats. It's for a PUD amendment and then a shoreland planned unit development /CUP, which I'll explain later. The applicant is Lisa Albane from Wayzata Bay Superior Retail and also Presbyterian Homes and Services. Project is located at the Promenade, which is on near downtown. In terms of zoning and land use, definitely a diverse set of uses and guidances around this development, but the important things to note is that the promenade is all part of one PUD, and that PUD is specifically guided downtown mixed-use district, a district that only encompasses the promenade. This is a quick aerial view for your reference. Superior Boulevard runs along the west and north sides, and then Mill Street runs along the south side. Everything's at a tilt, as it is in this part of Wayzata, but I'm going to be referring to Mill Street as the south side for the duration. For some street view context, the key plan to the left there gives you an idea of where you're standing for each shot. For number one, the important thing to note about this is if you're standing on Superior Boulevard and looking at the loading dock at the current space. Number two is if you walk down Superior a little bit further, this is sort of a wide angle of most of what the proposal would entail. Number three is looking at that corner at Mill Street and Superior, and then number four is right at the corner of Mill Street and Superior. You can see that that sort of corner feature architectural element. And then this is if you're standing on Mill Street. That first image is just the immediate south side of that corner. You can see it kind of tears up into that area. And then as you look to the east on that last image, you can start to see the last part of what the applicant is proposing to modify today. This building was completed in 2012 as part of the Promenade redevelopment. It's commonly referred to as the Superior Block. Each of the blocks has its own name. The first floor it contains that former retail/grocery space. For those who are around at that point, that was the Lunds and Byerly's kitchen, which was kind of a unique concept from Lunds and Byerly's. This was in there from 2014 to 2017, although I believe they may have vacated a little bit earlier than that. As well as some other commercial tenants. And then the upper floors are all senior residential and common space. Notably, you can see that there's one big outdoor common space in the middle there, that terrace, that's actually above that first floor, maybe the second. In terms of the dimensions of the project area itself, we're not going to be looking at the whole block. We're going to be looking at about a 35,000 square foot interior space on that first floor, the Byerly space, which also includes the loading dock area. The store itself space is about 25,000 square feet, and that loading dock adds quite a bit of area. For a little bit of history about the entitlements at this location, in 2008, the Promenade got their general plan approval, which was to do a mixed-use redevelopment of the entire Wayzata Bay Center, which was the mall. The planned uses on the Superior Block included that Lunds and Byerly space, retail, and then of course that senior living up on top. That persisted for a long time until 2019. There was a PUD amendment specifically for the Lunds and Byerly space. It was for a health club called Commonwealth. They actually did get approval from City Council at that time, but that tenant decided to exit the project before it was completed due to the pandemic. So they had pulled quite a few of their building permits, embarked on that work, and then in, I think, maybe July or August of that year, they decided to pull out in the face of all the uncertainty that was going on. In 2020, there was a PUD amendment that was a lot more expansive of the entire promenade. It expanded the list of uses allowed throughout specifically the first floors of most of the promenade buildings. As you can see, that yellow uses were expanded to be anything in the C4 or Central Business District, which is a lot of Lake Street, was now allowed on the first floor of those buildings. In blue, over by where the hotel is, there was also C4, but residential potentially allowed as a conditional use, so leaving a little bit of a window there. And then in red, they really wanted to reserve that at that point for retail and or restaurant uses only. And the discussion, as far as I can tell from both the City Council workshop on the topic and public meetings on the topic, was that those streets continue to have really high visibility. You know, there was an understanding that there was some relief needed for the interior of the promenade in terms of that existing list of uses, but that keeping those areas on Superior and on Lake Street was really important to make sure those were still really pedestrian-heavy uses and restaurants. To further that point a little bit, this is a leasing map from, I believe, last year, so it's a little bit outdated, but it hasn't been updated recently. You can see in the Superior block that big green space is the space that we're talking about today, but you can also see other vacancies sort of scattered throughout the development. Notably, there have been some adjustments since this map came out. Red Cow did move in a couple of days ago in that spot on the Plaza block, and there may have been some other shifts since then. So, but just to give you an idea. So to zoom in on the Superior block, that blue area is specifically that former Byerly's commercial space. The green next to it is that loading dock. In yellow is all the outdoor space that's included on this parcel, just so you can differentiate it from the building a bit. And then everything in white is either parking, additional commercial, which is up on the north side, or building support spaces. So the proposal in front of us is to take that blue area and convert that to 12 residential loft-style walk-up units, or walk-in, depending on what direction you come from, with interior common slash amenity space. So the requests that are associated with that is the PUD amendment, which is to take the slate of allowed uses in this space and add residential to it. It's not necessarily to make it residential only, it's just to say you may do residential here. And then that shoreland residential PUD slash CUP, which is a little bit of a quirk of our shoreland code, but it's basically anytime you do a project over 5 units in the shoreland district, you need to get this CUP. So that's what this is for. To zoom in a bit on these proposed floor plans, you can see that these are pretty big units. On the lower side of that image, you can see that everybody's got a little set of stairs and a door that leads into their unit if they want to walk in directly from the outside. Or if you go to the right of the image and look at that orange, that's a hallway that you can enter into and have an accessible entrance from the inside to get to your unit as well. So these units are intended to be 55 and over. If you have any sort of mobility issues, you're not going to be necessarily stuck walking up the stairs on the outside if you don't want to. So each of these units has that outdoor space, which I've zoomed in on a little bit there. And then notably, you can see that unit 1 is definitely one of the larger units out of everyone. If you stand on that corner and you look at that slate of windows today, that's where unit 1 would be. So the important thing to note here is that this is there's a lot of colors going on in this floor plan, but everything in blue is going to be those residential units. And they generally line the outside of this really big space so that everybody's getting that natural light and that exterior access. Yes, Commissioner Merritt?
Thanks. Quick question. So when it talks about the unit size, like for unit 1, it says 1874. So then that loft part would be 700 square feet? Is that what the mezz means?
Yep, mezzanine. Mm-hmm.
And so then, so it's stacked on top of, okay.
And that's part of the advantage of having that grocery store space is it really high ceilings. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity was there to fit a little bit more in.
Okay.
To go up a little bit, that first image is if you go a little bit further north on that key plan up there. These 3 units are actually 4 units are really within that loading dock specifically. So they're a little bit differently shaped than the other ones, but again, those can be accessed either from the outside or from the inside. And then you can see they start to fit in some storage spaces, some trash spaces as you go from there. Once you move to the interior of the building, the problem that you start running into is that you no longer have any natural light because you've lined the entire outside with apartments. So the applicant's idea is to basically have a pretty amenity-rich space here, a lot of different options for these residents because there's really not a lot else you can do with space that doesn't have that light from the outside. So wellness uses, community room, a lounge, some lobby space, a studio, basically just extra spaces for these tenants to use. These are some proposed exterior renderings. I just wanted to note that these have been up on the city website as part of the applicant's presentation. I initially neglected to include these in the packet initially. These were part of the applicant's original submission to us in June. And when I was looking back on all of the things that should go in the packet, that was a total oversight on my part. So since then, we've both printed them up on your dais there, and we've republished them in an amended packet that we got out this afternoon. That being said, this is the south elevation. So if you're standing on Mill Street, this is what you're looking north at. So the important things to note here is that generally much brighter. A lot of people look at the promenade and talk about how much brown is involved. So this would go a long way towards sort of a facelift for that south side and then differentiating it as a residential space as opposed to a retail space. It's a little tough to see, but you can start to see how everybody has their little walk-up space, a little bit of patio space outside. Basically a lot more rhythm and variety than what's there today. That first image is, if you remember that reference image where we were standing on Superior and looking south a little bit, same spot. That's looking at that sort of former loading dock area. And then that second image is that new corner elevation. So a lot of changes to the coloring, some changes to the windows themselves, trying to make it feel a little bit more residential, even though it is a lot of glass still. So a lot of questions about, when you convert a former grocery space to apartments, how do you talk about density? especially in a mixed-use development. That can be a really interesting question. When we talk about residential density, we're talking about residential units per acre, which is pretty easy. That's a certain number of people generally per amount of space. When we talk about commercial density, the way we talk about it here is kind of in employees per acre, which can get a little bit interesting depending on the use involved. With this math, though, we were finding that the proposal numbers-wise reduces the density from 53 units an acre to about 49 units an acre. And so that units an acre is supposed to be inclusive of residential and commercial intensity, essentially. But there's a couple other ways to talk about that, because the intensity of the use itself, we can talk about in more of a qualitative way too. When we talk about, how people interact with a grocery store, how people drive to and use and patronize a grocery store, that's going to be a much more intense use of that space than residential units will be. A lot less coming and going than a grocery store. And the numbers back this up. There's less traffic than grocery per the ITE manual, and also less parking need per our parking standards. One thing to note is that there's a big, complicated section in your staff report about density tiers and the Shoreland Overlay District. Basically, what that is about is that when you're near the lake, we want to make sure that we're pushing density out further from the lake shore. So there's a little bit of a system, there's a system in which as you get further from the lake, you're allowed to go a little bit more dense in exchange for, as you're closer to the lake, staying less dense. You sort of trade it off and push it further away. So these seem like really high unit counts. They're permitted under the Shoreland Overlay District density tiers. This one's also interesting because our comp plan designation says 20 to 30 units an acre. This overall project actually predates that comp plan designation of 20 to 30 units an acre, so that adds another bit of a wrinkle to this. But in terms of the density itself, it's compliant in staff size under the various ways in which we look at it. When it comes to notification, we notified all of Folkestone, so that was a lot of letters because it was everyone within 500 feet of the project. So the applicant sent out their letter, we sent out ours, and then for a PUD amendment or a CUP, we don't require a neighborhood meeting. As of November 3rd and of today, we haven't gotten any public comments. I got a couple of phone calls from residents of Folkestone who were just curious about the project, but nobody really expressed anything super negative about it. And then the engineering department has no comments on this proposal because it really doesn't affect them, honestly. It ends up being a lot less use on our resources than something like the grocery store would be. So I want to pay special attention to what your standards are for reviewing this request today. A PUD amendment is something that you have a wide berth on, a lot of discretion on in deciding, as long as it has a rational basis. I've included a couple of questions next that will guide you towards your decision. And then the Shoreland Residential PUD CUP is like a regular CUP. If it meets a certain set of standards, it would be an approval. So the majority of the discussion today is probably going to be about that PUD amendment. When we talk about that amendment, it'll be important to consider, does this create a development pattern that's in harmony with the objectives of the comp plan? The comp plan has a lot to say about this area, for sure. Does this proposal contribute to the area's walkability and pedestrian vitality, something that was discussed a lot with that 2020 PUD amendment on Superior Boulevard in particular? And then, overall, would converting the space to residential, positively change the relationship between the promenade development and the neighborhood? Is this something that is going to help things flow better between the promenade and the neighborhood in terms of having that development pattern of harmony, in terms of having that integrated, walkable area that we're all looking for? So with that, after you consider this, you'll ask us to put together a report and recommendation of approval or denial. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time?
This may be something to ask Presbyterian Homes, but do you know if these will be rentals or sales?
They're proposed to be rentals.
Okay. Because my other question is once we make this change, it's going to be that way. It's going to be a residential going forward indefinitely, correct? It's not that easy to go backward.
tough to knock down all the walls and start over.
Yeah, okay. So it's a permanent change to more residential and less commercial.
Basically, yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Maybe it's better to ask later, but do we have any information on vacancy rates within this PUD now and within the downtown area in general?
It's a good question. I checked in with Becky Pearson this morning after you emailed me to see if I could get any data on downtown in general. The chamber doesn't have that data. We don't have that data. It tends to be by looking at storefronts and seeing who's empty these days. For the most part, Lake Street is doing pretty well, with the exception of, that's the former Caribou space, and then, of course, we just lost Dock and Spade, so two that just opened up, but for the most part, seeming pretty low on Lake Street. That's obviously not the same story at the Promenade. We're looking at vacancy rates, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40% at this point. 60% apparently, although I'll wait for the applicant to come up and present in the microphone, so otherwise people can't hear, but much higher vacancy rates at the Promenade compared to the rest of downtown or to even other malls that's kind of the best comparable, is looking at those types of spaces. It's still higher than the national average for sure.
Yeah.
Miriam?
I saw in the packet that the designation between commercial and residential, it's supposed to be 60% commercial and 40% residential. Is that in the entire district or just in that block, or what does that mean exactly? And how does this change affect that?
It's a good question. We had been thinking about that particular breakdown in the context of the whole district, just because that whole district and that whole development is obviously under one set of approvals, so it's a little bit easier to think of it as a unit. In terms of whether this sort of tips the scale in favor of one or the other, that can be kind of tough to quantify because, we measure residential in units and we measure commercial in square footage, and it's tough to sort of meld those two together. But the thing to note is that, there's a lot of units in this development already. Adding 12 more is not going to make it so much more residential than it already is. But losing, 25, 35,000 square feet of commercial is a big difference in this development for sure. So
So it's in the entire 5 blocks is what it's talking about.
yep, that's the way that we've interpreted it.
And is the hotel considered all commercial because it's a hotel? I mean,
We'd consider the rooms in the hotel commercial.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Douglas?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about vacancies again, that you had talked to Becky. One time I did a survey when I was at the chamber and called all the major owners, and that was the only way I could get a true picture. But the thing is, as I drive down Lake Street, I can see empty office spaces too, and I think we have to, and it looks like, Lowell's development looks empty on Lake Street. So, I think we have to look at the big picture, not just retail, but office
Yeah, and I will
vacancy too.
note with 201 Lake, Lowell's its office development, he's moved his offices to the other building in anticipation of taking this building down for his redevelopment. So that's part of why that is vacant at this point, is because he's anticipating that change.
The new building, he's going to move in there. But I'm saying nobody's ever in there. I see people in there once a week at a meeting in his new building, but it has the name of a company in there. But I'm just saying, there can be a lot of vacancies that we can't see that are visual, like the storefront retail. So we have to look at the big picture right now, I think.
Definitely a fair point.
I have another question. Were other retail stores in the area notified of this public hearing, like Anthropologie and the new jewelry store and Benedict's and all those places?
I may have to defer that one to the applicant's later discussion. When we do notification, we do it to all the property owners as well as residents who rent. We don't necessarily have a separate process to reach out to commercial tenants of spaces, so it would have been up to the Promenade Property Management to reach out to their tenants and notify them.
Because I would think they would maybe be a little bit concerned about this change, but, just a thought. Thank you.
Question? Okay. So you said that a couple of other tenants have come in, or potential tenants with a gym and a couple of other things that have come in as well. Is this something that would be then subdivided? Like if a tenant came in and wanted only half of this rental space for like a commercial use or a retail use, would we break it up, or would they have to take the full 25,000 square feet?
I'll defer it to the applicant to go into a little bit more detail, but I believe when they were marketing it, if we go back to our leasing map, they do note that it's shown as divisible, basically
Oh, I
saying
see
that
that
you could
now.
have it as the full space, or you could potentially slice it up. So I think they were marketing it both ways.
Okay. And just so that I'm clear, the applicant currently owns this property,
Yes.
and they are proposing to do this instead of keeping it as the space that it is, or doing something different in another commercial. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Good questions, Commissioner Swalby?
Yeah, I may have missed something here, but a little bit ago, we were talking about vacancy rates in the promenade. And is that when we said it was at about 60%? Did I misinterpret that comment?
The applicant mentioned that it was at 60%.
62% of businesses or of rental, senior living, living space?
I'll defer it to the applicant's Q&A later, but I believe that 60% is commercial. I believe the residential areas are doing pretty well.
So the residential areas are doing well?
I believe so.
Okay.
Great. Well, those are good questions. If there's no further questions for staff, then at this time, I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward and address the commission. Please state your name and your address for the record, and your role, if you're an advisor or other part of the team. And thank you.
Thank you. Can you go to our,
I'll have it up in just a second.
is this unmuted? Can you
Your
guys-
phone's working.
Okay.
You can go
I
ahead.
can hear you.
Thank you so much for having me. My name's Lisa Albane. I'm the Senior Development Manager with Presbyterian Homes and Services. Actually work for Senior Housing Partners, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Presbyterian Homes and Services. I'm joined with my colleague, Chris Parkowicz from BKV Architects, and he's the one that we've been working in collaboration on this project together. So if we go, do I have a clicker up here?
Our clicker's out of battery, so just
Okay.
say advanced
All
slide.
right,
and I'll
so
take
if we
care
could advance it, advance one, there we go. So Valerie did a great job giving the history of the space, and from an owner's perspective, just wanted you to know that we opened Folkestone. We actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary last week. It's hard to believe that it's already 10 years old. And in 2017, that was when we officially had Lenz and Byerly's as vacating the property. That portion of the Superior Block has been vacated or vacant ever since. We have had intentional, concerted efforts to lease that space. It's a very large space, and we've had, as Valerie mentioned, 2 tenants that have taken legitimate runs at the space, but have not been creditworthy tenants and has just not been able to get to the finish line on those projects. To your question about whether or not the space was divisible, we did have a potential tenant that wanted 6,000 square feet of it, but they didn't want the space up towards the front of the building, simply because of the walkability, being able to access there with the stairs, and it's just difficult to get to that portion of the building. So that's really the history of the space. It's been ever since 2013. The retail space at the promenade has fluctuated between 30 and 60% occupancy. And right now we're actually at 63% occupancy, which is not great, but it's better than it has been in the past. But it has been a significant impact to our ministry at Presbyterian Homes with this vacant space for so many years. And it's something that we're looking to increase the vitality there. If you've walked in that part of the development, it's a very lonely, desolate part of the community. And it's not a very welcoming, warm place that you would necessarily want to go and sit on a bench. And you definitely would have some quiet time if you were in that area of the development. But we're really wanting to activate Mill Street. We're looking to create more of a pedestrian experience, a more lively experience, to be able to create activity when people are driving down Superior and driving on Mill Street, so that they see people out on their front porch or coming and going within their apartments and going and frequenting Lake Street and the other retail spaces that are available within the promenade. So what we're proposing is 12 luxury apartments that will meet the independent living demand. Currently, Folkestone independent living is 99.1%. We've got 2 vacant apartments that are actually reserved. They're just being turned, and we have well over 125 people on the waiting list for Folkestone for independent living. We see this as an opportunity for us to be able to create a 55-plus active community that would be part of Folkestone. So it's a different offering than what we currently have, so it would enhance our reach with our ministry and reach a younger demographic of senior. And with this conversion, when we look at what the occupancy rate would be at the retail, we would actually have an 81% occupancy in the retail as opposed to 63 if we were to be able to go forward with this conversion. An average unit size for these apartments is 1,600 square feet and approximately 6,200 square feet of amenity space within. Many of the apartments are 2-bedroom apartments, but all of them would have a primary bedroom on the main floor with another bedroom up on the mezzanine level that could be used as an office or a guest room or whatever our residents would like to use it for. And our anticipated outcomes here is that it would provide for the entire development, and I think downtown Wayzata, just that much needed activation of that area of the city. It'll eliminate 30,000 square feet of, and I say this wholeheartedly, vacant retail that we have tried very hard for the last 6 years to lease to no avail. The building, as you saw with the renderings, a wonderful refresh, bringing in some light colors and vitality there, maintaining a residential feel, but more of like a downtown kind of urban loft kind of feel. And then it does balance the overweighted retail portion and replaces that with some in-demand senior housing. And we're still providing 87,000 square feet of retail in that Lake Street area. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Chris Pelkowicz. I am an architect and practice lead with BKV Group, and we've been in Minneapolis for 44 years. Just taking a look at the exterior along Main Street and just around Wayzata just kind of gave us some inspiration of how to do some refresh of Folkestone. You can see the Folkestone in the bottom right, and as mentioned here previous, that it does have a lot of earth tones in it, brown tones and different tans in it. And as you see with some of the newer building stock that's kind of going in, there's a variety of other tones of whites and creams and wood tones and other darker tones going in as well. So we kind of took that to heart and also just kind of took in the existing palette as well. And you'll see how that is reflected in a few slides. Here's the existing corners. I think this has been covered pretty well, so we'll keep moving. And the interior vision of the space overall is this loft-style living, as mentioned before. So there will be some interior stairs of these units. It is a concrete structure at this portion of the building, so it will have a little bit more of that industrial edge to it. And we could certainly have the aesthetic choice to clean it up, but we kind of want to give it a different feel and a different product type overall than the rest of Folkestone. So we are going with a little bit more of an industrial feel of this. And as mentioned, there's going to be second floor space in this as well. And I think just really the top left and the bottom right images kind of capture a little bit of how the spaces will approximately lay out and what the experience will be like, with a lot of glass up front and that two-story space in the front, and then sharing the light to those spaces. But each of the ground floor units, or a majority of the ground floor units, will have a bedroom out on the glass as well. I believe there's one that doesn't. And then on the interior space, as mentioned from Valerie, that there is no natural light in that portion of the building. So we're really being thoughtful of how we're going to bring in a different experience, to bring in aspects of the outdoors into the space. We are going to study actually having a true grow wall. We don't know if this is going to be the right space for it or not. We've done it on some other projects, but that's a little bit yet to be determined. But we're really bringing in a nicely lit experience and something that will be enjoyed, and it will be connected to the residents up the building as well. So there will be shared amenities between the existing residents. So it'll be a benefit to them. And then the new concept. Overall on the floor plan, we really wanted to start by just the overall design of looking at the comprehensive plan goals. And some of the comprehensive plan goals that really stuck out to us were the walkable and pedestrian-friendly experience, really creating something that's a bit charming, and then also looking at multi-generational space. And as mentioned, that Folkestone on its own and the whole promenade already is multi-generational, but these 12 units are adding a different product type as well that are a little bit for the younger generation, as you're seeing with stairs in it. The people that have a little bit of limited mobility, these aren't going to be the units for them, but there's other units within the overall development. Then on the exterior, where we really started to look at the architectural language and start to make some changes. You want to go a couple slides forward to the elevation? I think this is a great slide, thank you. That right here, it kind of tells the story along Mill Street of how we studied the space. The lower image is the existing image, and it was done as a larger commercial feel overall. You have larger bands of windows. There's out at the columns, between columns is a perf metal signage band is out there as well. And you just kind of have a larger expression for the larger space that was the grocery store. And taking that in and modifying this space to a residential feel, we really looked at creating a variety of experiences. Each of these units is going to be custom to its own because of the uniqueness of the loading dock and where columns are placed. So each of these spaces will be a bit unique. So you're seeing even in the entries that some of these will have their own walk up stairs to their entry point. You're seeing those on the left-hand 4 units. And then on the right-hand units, they'll actually have the little porches out at sidewalk level as well. And they'll have a flush entry. But beyond breaking down the scale of these larger ribbon windows, we broke down these individual entry points. So within the entry points, we have material changes in how much glazing there is, clearly identifiable points of entry for those units with decorative address numbers, a wall sconce, a nice decorative architectural door. We've added additional canopies to this. And then we've changed some of the material on here and further accentuated the colonnade even as it's working through. And then as we're taking some of the stone off and looking at replacing it with a cream-colored thin brick, that it will be complementary to the overall design. And we can't do, I want to be clear on the brick choice. The current stone is not the full bed depth stone, so we can't replace in kind with full brick. It is like the adhered stone, so we have to replace it with the adhered brick at this point, just so that's clear. But we want to replace a masonry with a masonry is how we're looking at it. We're not trying to downgrade the quality of the overall experience. Could you go to the next slide? And the overall on the corner here, it will modify that there was a different feel for the retail of how it came down to grade. And now what we're doing is we're kind of creating a couple layers here to turn it into a residence. That we're building in a planter down at a slightly raised planter down at grade, and then up at the actual floor level, they'll have a nice outside patio up there as well with a railing. And then on Superior Street, that's where a lot of activation is going to really change at this point as well. That this is going to become multiple units. Instead of the large loading doors at the end, those will become windows and entry points to some of the units. And then further, we'll have mid-block entry points as well. So even just as some of the subtle changes in the windows, the kind of the water course mark of where those windows are is rather high, up at maybe about 3 feet right now currently. And we're gonna bring that down to modify it, and just even by putting the trim below it or bring in some of the cement board with the darker finish, it just makes the arched area feel a little bit more recessed and further just kind of accentuates the colonnade and adds more to the visual interest. So we're trying to be really thoughtful in the ways that we're making each little space along here a bit more charming and kind of capture the essence a little bit more of the area. So maybe with that, let's go back to the main corner rendering. It's just the very last piece I have a comment on. A few more back. Thank you. Yeah, that one there. And just giving the feel here that we're expecting there will be potentially some new signage. We don't know what that would be to kind of give this area a feel. But overall, as you can see with the rendering, we feel like we're still creating a strong corner node here, and we're not really degrading the value of the overall asset. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, the applicant. Commissioners, I think we probably have some questions. I'd like to ask a question from the bat. The mezzanine level, I thought I saw in the plan drawing that they're also accessible from the hall as well. Is that correct?
The first floor level is accessible from the hall for all units.
All, okay.
The mezzanine level is not.
Is not. Okay, so that's what I was seeing. Okay, thank you.
Do the units on Mill Street go up to the entrance to the garage there?
Very
I think
close.
it was page 13, maybe.
Very close to. There's a corridor that gives an accessible entry at that point, and also just one of the points of egress from there. So there's a little bit of relief from the garage entry at that point.
And then on page 11, the diagram 11, the corner, you showed a terrace there on the corner with the gardens. Then is that somebody's unit? Oh, there. Is that in somebody's unit then?
That is someone's unit, and that would be their private terrace.
Oh, their private terrace. Okay. All right. I misunderstood. Thank you.
I have a couple questions, if I may. Is there an elevator that would get a person up, instead of having to go up those steps on the exterior? Is there an elevator within the building that would go to that level?
To the mezzanine level of the
Yes,
units?
yeah.
Not currently planned.
Not currently planned. So it wouldn't be handicap accessible?
So in the Minnesota Building Code, you are allowed to have these style of units. Then you don't necessarily, as long as you're providing certain aspects like a first floor bedroom and other aspects, you don't have to provide full accessibility to all the locations.
Can you go back to I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, it sounds like the units themselves would be accessible.
Yes.
But then
from the
the
hallway.
little, like, upstairs half floor.
Okay,
In
so
the
how-
apartment, like, then you'd have to,
Well, how do you get into the apartment?
So into the apartment itself, you can either come in from the street or with the plan up on the screen. I don't know if you can see it on your screen. You can either come through the garage. There's an entry vestibule within the garage itself, or you can come in on Mill Street. That there's the entrance on Mill Street. So you have 2 points of flush entry.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. And then, when I look at your amenities and garden bar page, I'm not sure what these photos are supposed to indicate, because like the top left and the bottom right both clearly have natural light coming in, and so I'm just curious what you're trying to show on.
This is just to give an essence of what the idea is. The spaces have not been flushed out yet.
Okay.
In theory, you could have grow lamps in there for plants.
Yes.
I have a question
Yes, please, Commissioner Swamy.
about the units, say, on Superior Boulevard. How much privacy do they have from the sidewalk? Is there, what kind of setback is there from the sidewalk to where the unit starts?
Very, very little, honestly. That they would, what we were looking at is they could have the roll-up shades to provide themselves some privacy, but kind of with the existing condition, we weren't proposing to try to add any landscape buffer right now. We're just modifying kind of what was there.
Okay, so are they going to be closer to the sidewalk than, say, Wayzata Blue is?
I don't know that condition well enough. I
Okay.
apologize to be able to.
Maybe I could ask staff that question.
I'd have
terms
to
of
check.
setback of-
The building itself at Wayzata Blue, I think, is right on the sidewalk, but I would have
Yeah.
to check if the unit,
Right.
if there are units right up on the front like that. I know I think some of that building is parking on that first floor.
And so we're talking about other ones that are right on the sidewalk. Okay. And a lot of those units in Wayzata Blue, actually, it's a porch that's right on the sidewalk and a screened-in area before you actually get to the heavy glass doors. But are yours glass, is it going to be right up there, very close to the sidewalk? Or is
Yes,
there a-
right now as proposed, it is the units are, basically the windows for the units are right up to it's a gracious sidewalk through this area. And, and you make an interesting comment there that could the sidewalk be modified and a little landscape buffer be put in? Could be something that could be considered for that.
Or those units are just not quite as deep as you have them, and they get pushed in a little bit with some landscaping on the outside. That's a possibility. It would decrease the square footage, but it would give room for a buffer from the sidewalk.
That's a possibility. It would definitely add complexity to the kind of the exterior envelope of the building and weatherproofing and how that is all done, though, at the same time.
What do you mean by a gracious sidewalk?
Well,
How wide is it there, would it be? It's more than the 5 feet.
it's more than the 5 feet. It's, it's hard to see the plan from here, but it's more like, there's at points, because there's the boulevard trees and some green space for those, it kind of varies between probably, I don't know, 12 feet and then squeezes down to maybe 8 feet at times. And, it's potentially even wider than that.
That's what I figured.
Are you able to comment on how you arrived at 11 units? Was there, these are large units. I don't think, with potentially two occupants per unit, that's, 22 people. I don't know if I call that activation of an area. So I guess I'm curious why only 11? Why weren't more smaller units considered? The change in the design certainly is activating, but 22 occupants to me doesn't seem terribly activating, especially when you look at all the condos in part of that development. You never see people outside, so I'm just curious why only 11?
Sure. Actually, we have 12 units. And the reason that we had larger units, we had our first plan showed a larger number of units, but the feedback that we received, not just from the city, but also from our own, I want to say our own company, just looking company-wide, where do we see the most demand? It's in those larger units. And so that's what led us to the 12 units.
I have a question. I appreciate your statistic on the 81% retail, and I appreciate the style and the vibrancy that this new palette, and quite frankly, accessibility offers. And I couldn't help but think what nice boutiques they would be for shopping. And I wish they were that way for a while. But it's nice to see them now, you know, from on the Superior side, the trees, which are lovely. We love trees in Wayzata, make no doubt. However, they do really block what could be a facade and would be a facade in the instance that those were not residential but retail. So I'm just wondering, you know, did you, and especially with the lack of windows, so the loft design makes a lot of sense. But did it occur to you to look at this as boutique before moving, you know, because a lot of times it's a big retail space. It's really hard for larger or smaller customer potential clients to realize what it could be looking like, and it's very appealing. So yeah, to have you considered it from that perspective, even though you have this 81% and we're seeing that.
Well, there's 30 to 60% is what the occupancy has been, or vacancy has been, since we opened Folkestone. So it's been a struggle to get tenants into the
Yes, that has been.
And we have been very intentional about trying to lease this space for the last 6 years. And unfortunately, you know, even when Red Cow, it's a great example, we were trying hard to get Red Cow to go into this location. They didn't want to be there because there wasn't the visibility. They didn't have the foot traffic, the accessibility there. It just was not conducive for a restaurant, what they were trying to, what they were envisioning. And so the same could be said about any of a boutique or smaller type of user. The space is, as you can see, there's a lot that you can do with it, but it's really up to the tenant to want to take the risk to do business there. And it's been very difficult, to say the least, to get an interested party.
Yeah, it does feel that the Superior connection is a transporting to Upper and Lower Wayzata quite a bit. We do have the project across the way, which is going to have some residences right across the street from these proposed residences, which would add shoppers. So, you know, and you could kind of, I guess, think that with the Muni being right there, they're kind of like a natural sort of stopping point. But what about on the other side, the south side of the building? Does your proposal for residences still work with the amenities and whatnot if the south side of the building were to be focused more on retail? And rather than the Superior side, which may be different in terms of its traffic pattern?
The retail portion of the Superior side, is that what you're talking about, leaving that as retail?
I'm saying that, to your point, that the Superior can be more sort of a transient, not stop and shop kind of a roadway, that looking at that, okay, maybe there's a residential aspect to that. It would match what's being proposed across the street in Superior, not proposed, built across the street from Superior. But on the, I guess it's Mill Street side, could, you know, those also look much more appealing now as more boutique shops. Is that something that you would consider?
Unfortunately, we've tried for the last 6 years, actually longer, since Byerly's has vacated. We just have been unsuccessful in our attempts to do that. And I would say, in order for us to financially make this work, to convert this space and to add the amenities and to convert it from commercial to residential, it's going to take some real dollars, and converting only a portion of it, just, we could not get that to pencil.
Thank you.
Well, and my question would be also, you know, why couldn't you make the conversions to make it more workable as retail space? And my other question is, have you negotiated on lease prices or considered, you know, decreasing what you're charging for the space? 'Cause
Yes.
I can think of, that's a great location for retail with the walkability. It's got the connection to other areas of retail. You're gonna have a bunch of new residents up on the hill there where Wells Fargo is. There's new people living on Lake Street, because there's lots of new residential along Lake Street. There are a lot of people here that would be excited about having some retail along that stretch. And it was really important when this project was approved in 2007. The retail was really important. That's what people wanted from this project. That's why they were so forceful in wanting the whole development to happen. There's 5 stories there because they wanted the retail experience.
And in good faith, Presbyterian Homes did build that space. And for the last 6+ years, we've really struggled with the amount of retail space that we have had. We serve seniors. We're a nonprofit organization, and to have a 30 to 60% vacancy rate for the life of the project is substantial. And we're looking for an opportunity to be able to expand our ministry, to be able to reach a population of people that would be living in this area that we're not serving currently, that would be participating in and supporting the retail on Lake Street and in the rest of the promenade as well. But the reality is we have been trying for 10 years to get the promenade full, and we are the highest it's ever been right now at 63% 10 years later.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yeah, on a similar note to Laura's, I think you should think about taking action on what you're proposing here. A lot of people are wondering, the general question, well, how hard have you tried? So if you could share with us maybe some proactive measures that you've taken to just so people understand the difficulties you've had and maybe the concessions you made in lease rates or guarantees, lease duration, all those kind of things. I mean, if you could talk
Sure.
about that a bit, it'd be helpful.
Sure. Well, from the day one, we have a commercial broker that's been working and has been the same brokerage firm that's been with us for 10 years. We've recently just made a change, and we have a new property manager that's managing the site, just trying to create more involvement and activation in that area. One of the users that we had entered into an agreement that had done work, we had invested, I don't really feel comfortable going into the amount of money, but a 6-figure figure for tenant improvement allowances in that space, and then had them walk away from that space. And that was all our responsibility. We offer a generous tenant improvement allowance for for tenants that are coming into the space. Our brokers are constantly networking and part of the Chamber of Commerce and trying to create visibility to the project, but it's been tough. It's been very difficult.
I guess just to continue this conversation, my gut says and I could be wrong, but when you've got 35,000 square feet there, are you positioning it to lease 35,000 square feet, or are you putting out there as we'll help, build to suit? I mean, to earlier points, if units 4, 5, 6, and 7 were already built as potential retail spaces, that would certainly look more desirable to a prospect wanting to open retail than, I have to figure out how to carve out a piece of 35,000 square feet. So, I'm just, how have you positioned that space with prospects? Have you been promoting it as we'd love one tenant taking 35,000 square feet, or we're willing to build to suit, or, I'm curious.
Yep, we are willing to build to suit. In fact, I think I shared that the last potential tenant that we had was only interested in 6,000 square feet, so we were working with them, and that didn't work out. And it all has to do with the visibility for retail. It's not there on that internal south side of the building. The visibility is, and the walkability in that area is challenging because of the grade that you have at that portion of the building. But the building itself, or the space itself, has always been marketed as being divisible. It's never been marketed as take one, it's take it all or take nothing. We have, we'll carve out, we have even considered, maybe 1,800 square feet. And then they moved over and they went over towards Lake Street because there was visibility over there. So Red Cow is a great example. This is the first place we showed them, and then they moved over towards Lake Street because of the visibility there. So we have, in good faith, we have been marketing this and trying to get this space filled with tenants. Multiple tenants, one tenant, just trying to fill it unsuccessfully.
Okay, but what about along Superior? There's lots of visibility there. I know that's where the loading zone was, but couldn't that be converted into retail space? Like little
It all-
storefronts
Yeah, but I'm just saying that nobody wants to go there. No, none of
along
the,
Superior.
exactly. We haven't had any interest in the superior portion of the building. The traffic, there's really nowhere to park along that side. People have, getting access into that superior side is more challenging than it would be on the southern portion because you've got direct access there to the parking garage. That in where you could see, I don't know if you have your pointer, Valerie, where that orange section is, you can see that there's a lobby. That was the main entry into the grocery store, so there's that underground parking. I keep doing that. Underground parking, and then that direct access at grade into the building there. And so the storefront access along the south side would be the retail, but also they would need to have that primary retail access, but they would need that back of house access for accessibility as well because of the grades.
I have a question because I've been involved in this project since 2006. Saw a lot, sat in on probably 30 meetings in the planning.
There was a lot.
Yeah, architectural committee, a lot of things. That development was okayed because they thought they were going to replace the retail in Wayzata, correct? We wanted to replace the retail in Wayzata, and that was the promise. And when it opened, when Lund's opened, I thought, this is a huge mistake. Nobody's living here yet. They opened way too soon. And the concept just didn't work. People 10 years later were saying, we don't know where to park in this development. It's all indoor parking. They didn't know where the garages were. I think there were a lot of factors that have affected this development. And when it finally got started, all of a sudden, online shopping became popular. And people want to be on Lake Street. I'm the former director of the Chamber of Commerce. They wanted an address on Lake Street. And I'm not, I know we're not at that discussion point yet, but I'm trying to answer some of your questions because I've kind of been in on it too. It's visibility is everything. Your sign is a huge part of your marketing. If that can be seen, that's really important, your sign on your building. And it's just been a challenge from the start. And I know when we changed some of the uses, was that 2020 you said? That was to help a little bit. And it has a little, but it's mostly office and residential. And so it's a real dilemma, and it's a big thing to change the PUD, what it allows. It really is a big thing. But
However, to your point, visibility is everything, and retail is risky business.
It is, yeah.
I want to keep the questions directed at our applicants so they don't get tired
Yeah.
of standing.
I'm sorry, but I'm
That's
just.
okay, no, it's great history,
kind
and
of-
it's hard to know
yeah.
when to pop that in there, so
Yeah,
you can
I
be
just-
asking the right questions.
But I know what you've gone through. I've kind of been on the
Yeah.
inside of it, yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Severson.
So for these new residents, what would be their parking situation?
There are, I believe, 76 or 72 public parking spaces currently that were required for the grocery, and there would be 24 parking stalls in there for residents.
So they would be dedicated spaces
Correct.
for these folks. And then that internal space, is that intended just for the residents then, or is that going to be open to the public?
No, this would just be for residents. It would be, this community would be a part of the Folkestone campus, so we're actually the Mill Street was just a placeholder because it was on Mill Street, and but the name is not going to be Mill Street Flats, but it would be part of Folkestone, so the residents who live here at this community really are a demographic that are just not quite ready to move into a senior living community, but they want that priority access when the time comes. And so this is a separate, more active adult type community with these shared amenities that residents within Folkestone can come and participate in, as well as they can go over to the main campus and participate in those amenity areas there too.
So then Press Homes would be managing this?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
And your comment earlier, if this were converted to residential, this square footage increases your occupancy to 81%?
The retail occupancy would then be 81%.
Right. Can we go back to the slide that would show the remaining unoccupied retail spaces? I think it had the red.
And that's not a current.
that's not on
it's
yours,
not a
okay.
Yeah, we
current,
saw that.
Sorry, that's an old plan.
Oh, okay.
It's not been
Never mind.
updated.
All right. Not important.
There it is. You seen that?
Commissioner Mary,
Have
do you
you-
have another question?
So there we are.
No?
I did, but I can't think of it now.
Okay. Commissioner Schwalbe, it'll come to you.
Have you had experience in the past with people's reluctance? I'm back to the units being right on the sidewalk. A reluctance of people to lease a spot that is right on a sidewalk like that? I just worry about the privacy issue, and if there's any way, I know you have to keep the architecture there, but if you could indent where the windows start to the actual unit. Well, so what is your experience of people being willing to be that situated right there on a sidewalk?
I don't know if you're familiar with the Marvella project in St. Paul, down at Highland Bridge. We just developed 2 city blocks there within that development, and we're now working on a phase 2, and that phase 2 will actually be very similar to what we have here. They're more like a walk-up like you'd see on the East Coast, and you just walk into the building or into the unit, and people actually really like that access.
But are these walk-ups on Superior?
They're the same as the ones that we have over on the south side, on Mill Street. They're still individual entries. I think that we can, yeah,
See, there's,
right, I'm sorry, I meant,
Superior's flush.
yeah. So I think, I mean, we can definitely, I think it would be a good idea to study it and see if we could provide a landscape buffer where some of that concrete is, that we could create some separation there, so at least visually it would not feel like someone's walking by your house and
I don't know why,
close
but
to
every
your
time I
door.
walk by a building where the window to the living room is right there, it makes me uncomfortable just walking by it, so.
And that's, I mean, these are concept drawings right now, just to see what we could fit into that space and what we could imagine that it would be like. These are very, very preliminary, so it's definitely something that we can study.
So we can ask you to look at that? You'd be-
Absolutely.
Okay,
We'd be happy to.
okay.
Any further questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Miriam.
I was just curious, because, you know, a couple of your tenants, Gunderson's and Anthropology, are along that stretch. Have you discussed this with them? And did they get the letter for the public hearing? Are they aware of?
Our management company that is managing this development is aware of it. We specifically have not reached out to them. I'm not sure if the management company has or not,
You're not sure
but we made them aware.
how they would feel about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's nice to have that critical mass.
Sure.
And I would hate for, you know, it to trickle down and all of a sudden, you know, other retailers are saying, well, now we can't make it. And then that gets you know, it's just, once this goes away, it's gone. And that's a huge concern.
Yeah. And we still are, I think, Press Homes is still the largest, if not the largest, provider of retail in the city. We still have 87,000 square feet of retail here within this development, so.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for answering all of our many questions. Appreciate the dialogue and understanding of the various aspects of this complex piece. So, right. Next, we are going to turn to the public hearing. Before I begin, I'd like to make a few comments. The public hearing is a time for us to listen to you, our community, about the approval requests we're considering. It's an important part of the official process that allows the public to participate. Any questions asked during the public hearing will be held until the end of the hearing and may be addressed by staff at that point. With that said, I now open the public hearing. I need the name of the, for the consider of the application for PUD amendment and shoreland residential PUD / CUP at 825 Mill Street East. Are there any members of the public who'd like to come up and speak this evening, please? If you would state your name and address for the record and let us know if you're connected to the applicant in any way or are representing anyone else.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good to see, I know many of you, and it's a different experience to be in this part of the room. My name is Bob Ambrose. I served on the City Council for 16 years, ending at the end of 2004. And I was on the Planning Commission and chaired it for 4 years before that. So I've experienced what you're going through, and I don't minimize the occasional agony that occurs. But the main, and I also want to say, although I just met the applicant here tonight, I'm not here because they asked me. I'm here because, well, a couple reasons. One, I am a relatively new resident of Folkestone in the South Terrace building. I live directly above Benedict's. But more important, to me at least, is that back when I was on the Planning Commission and on the council in the late 80s and early 90s and on, that's really when the focus on having street level retail began to be emphasized. I was around when Peggy was Commissioner Douglas was head of the chamber. I think that is a very important factor and very important policy that has really helped the city become more pedestrian-oriented, and it has helped businesses in general along Lake Street. However, I'm here today to urge you to support this proposal because this is one place where, in spite of major efforts to find a tenant who could use this space, a retail tenant, it has been unsuccessful, and I don't see any prospects. Now, I'm not an expert in marketing property by any means, but I do know that when I come down Superior, what I see is a blank wall. That is not conducive to wanting to walk by there or wonder where the retail shop is. It's just, the impression is a blank wall. If there were windows with units opening on the street there and on Mill Street, whether you see people going in and out or not, you see those front doors and you say, that's a residential situation. And I think you would be more amenable to strolling past there and increasing that pedestrian traffic. Now, right now with construction, it's even less inviting, but I think this is a very good solution to a situation that is causing stress, both financially and in terms of how we view this portion of the city. I do remember when the Bay Center was there, and I was anxious, frankly, to get rid of it at almost any cost. The blacktop was breaking up. It was a miserable. It was a miserable vision of what Wayzata was, and what we have now is so much better. There are, not to say that it's perfect. I might suggest that if this, hopefully this goes forward, one more amenity I would suggest for the relatively, for the folks who move in who are kind of on the younger end of that 55 and up clientele, it might be helpful to have a couple electric vehicle charging stations in that public lot. So just a thought, but anyway, I've gone on probably too long already, but I do think that this is an occasion when the Planning Commission could use the relative flexibility that's available to you with the PUD amendment to try something that certainly will be better than 6 more years of searching for a tenant. So,
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Chair,
Thank you.
Mr. Ambrose, could I ask for your street address, please?
Oh, yes.
Could I ask for your street address for the record?
oh, sorry. It's 825 Lake Street East, apartment 414.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you, I didn't catch that. Is there anyone else here tonight that would like to speak? If not, Director Gellner, do we have anybody on Zoom this evening?
We do not, Chair.
Okay, well then, thank you, everybody. Seeing that there's no one else, I'd like to close the public hearing and turn it to the commissioners for discussion.
Well, I have a clarifying question. Does Folkestone own the whole promenade?
Yes, they do.
And were they the original developers?
They were.
And going back to what Commissioner Merriam said, their concept at the time was retail, if I remember correctly, right?
I understand that there were a number of community meetings over a series of years that led to a summary that's in our staff report of the total square footage of retail that was required for the property. I think it was over 100,000 square feet of retail was planned. And I think at the time, there was a lot of discussion around wanting to keep that retail base that had existed in the old shopping center and hoping that that would create more draw to the area for bars and restaurants as well.
Sure. And if we were to convert this space, what would that do to the overall mix between retail and residential for the project?
So I think it would make a fairly significant impact on the amount of square footage devoted to retail because there is 35,000 square feet here. So that would make a fairly significant impact.
Yeah.
The unit count wouldn't necessarily change dramatically, right? Because it's only 12 units of increase. So I think the impact is more felt on the amount of commercial that's provided in the development.
Thank you for.
I have a question. There was a 10-year anniversary recently, but has the building been operational for 13 years or 10? This element?
That's a good question. I would look to the applicant for those specific vacancy times and timelines.
Okay, I apologize for not getting that clarified. You know what? This is really important information. That's no problem. Thank you very much for coming back to the podium.
The building was, or the master development was opened in phases. So the residential portion that we celebrated the 10-year anniversary is what was opened 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Yeah, Commissioner.
While you're up there, is Regatta owned and the hotel owned by Press Homes?
No, ma'am.
No, just the Folkestone area.
Correct.
Yeah, and then does that service, that trucking ramp was built specifically for that building for Lunds and Byerly's, right?
Correct,
You
for the grocery
hauling, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have one more. Have you come, since 10 years, have you come back to make any other improvements along the way to have the building be more accessible from the exterior on that Superior side?
The only adjustment or changes that were made to the space was when the wellway was going in, and they actually were considering putting a swimming pool in that loading dock area. So we actually filled that with concrete. And, and so that's the only change that I know as far as
Thank you.
bringing that area up.
More question. Sorry.
So the retail space at ground level, at Hotel Landing, as you go east towards the roundabout, is that part of your property?
It is.
Okay. And just clarify, we're talking about this being, taking 35,000 square feet, but isn't over 10,000 loaded dock space now?
I think it's, what is the
It's
total?
like 10 or
Chris?
12,000, I thought I read.
12,000, was it?
It's in that range,
Correct,
though, right?
correct,
Okay.
So it's less.
Yeah, it's about 25 is what I thought, but.
correct.
That's a good point. Thank you. Is there any other questions for the applicant?
Hit the microphone one more time.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for those follow-up questions. Right, so I think it's now time to have dialogue amongst ourselves in terms of how we're looking at this complex thing. I mean, I think what I'm sensing is a question of timing. There seems to be some sentiment, at least thus far, maybe it's changed in the last questions, that, we have been staring at a blank wall and that these drawings could look like it'd be very nice retail right now. So the timing, however, comes after an atypical period of COVID and changes since, I think, pretty big, significant changes in retail and in shopping patterns. So we have this delay effect, but now we're looking at making a strategic decision for the city that would change the idea around this area that's permanent, right? And, is that a good decision also for the city? Long-term, it's complicated. I'm throwing that out there for follow-up discussion.
Well, just because retail is desired by residents doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing in a particular space. It is as evident by the number of apartment buildings that are constantly being built. There is demand for living space. However, it's also common for retail spaces to remain empty because, as I said earlier, retail is a risky business and depends heavily on visibility. So I think this is the wrong space for retail. Lake Street is a great space for retail. Unless everything in that development were filled with retail, you will not have success because boutique retail is more of a casual shopping experience when you're out dining or walking around a city. It is not destination retail like going to Target or a mall where you intentionally say, I'm going to drive there. Very seldom is that the case for a boutique unless you're someone who exclusively goes and buys your clothes at that particular small boutique clothing retailer. So I'm just saying, having said that, I'm in favor of this. I think it's a very good proposal for this property. I do find that, if the spaces along Superior were to be retail, their entrances would almost have to be from the inside. I mean, it's high up. I mean, you don't want to make people go up steps on that Superior side to get into the retail. So it's challenging in that regard. It's challenging in its visibility for retail. And as I said, you can certainly overbuild retail, but it's rare to overbuild residencies because they're always in demand.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Eng here. I think that this is a good project for this location, and I was actually quite happy to receive it, to take a look at it, because it has been sitting there for quite a long time, and it's time for something to be done with it. I love the renderings. I love adding the cream and the white. It's going to be a nice brightener and boost for that whole building. And in fact, when it's time to do some painting to the rest of the development, a little bit of that would be a good idea too. I worry a little bit about the closeness to the sidewalk, of those units on Superior. If you can do something to alleviate a little bit of that, I would appreciate it. But I see this as definitely contributing to the area's walkability, pedestrian vitality. It certainly puts that there. I think on the whole, it would be a great addition to Wayzata. I don't see any issues with the comprehensive plan, and I'm in favor of the project.
I want to dialogue a little bit more on that for my own development of thought. You convinced me earlier that 22 people doesn't activate.
Yeah, I
area.
agree. Yeah.
And, I kind of was thinking about that because, aesthetically, my reaction is really positive. I wish I saw this earlier this way. But I agree on that boutique comment, that, it's not necessarily destination retail, but then we're also trying to connect Upper Wayzata and Lower Wayzata. And the more foot traffic you have, we lose the potential for some foot traffic. And then there was the comment by the applicant that they did have interest in a 6,000 square foot. Now, these are 4,000 or 3,000, smaller, but could be combined type things. But one boutique isn't going to look at 24,000 square feet and know how to figure that out, or want to, really, because they're waiting for all those other possibilities to be visibly there. And that's kind of why I started out with this timing thing, because there's this enormous weight on this decision where it feels as though the applicants looked at this for a very, very long time. At the same time, it's never really been visibly viable to a, this is Wayzata, a cost-conscious retail trying to make it here. It's very difficult. We don't have a lot of well-priced options, and the potential to have fewer doesn't make the pricing of the existing ones go down. In fact, it causes some sort of further clog. So I'm just thinking, playing devil's advocate a little bit, intellectually, potentially, is, how does that impact the city longer term? Because I'm feeling that same sort of thing, which, Superior is a pass-through, transient area. But there's nothing to look at right now. There's something to look at here, and suddenly you can see it being livable, not only rentable, but like livable. And then you could say, well, okay, those trees, God forbid we cut down a tree, but block the view of those facades. But then on the other hand, it's like, okay, well, the Muni kind of marks like the upper end of what could be perceived as being Lake Street, because there's nothing between it and Lake Street. So it draws has the potential with signage and aesthetics to draw people to that corner where there's currently a sign. And then maybe leading people into the development and offering the critical retail that was critical at one point in time. The question as to whether or not retail there is critical or not now, I don't know if we're reopening that, because the whole nature of that building was built with that kind of anchoring the town in a way. But then again, at the same time, 10 years has elapsed, with a huge blip in the radar screen, however. So I'm still sort of, thinking that through, and hoping maybe somebody can bring those comment on what I've just brought up.
I just like to make a comment that, was stated tonight. Presbyterian Homes they're not in the retail business. They're in the business of senior housing.
Yeah.
And that's what they do really well. And it's obvious that's part of the reason why they'd want to expand their housing options in that block, especially because they seemingly have not had great success in leasing out the space. But I keep going back to, and I said it already in this meeting, when this project was approved, it was because people were coming in here pleading and begging for the retail mass, for more retail, to keep retail alive. And I agree with your comments that along that stretch, you can make it there are ways to make it more appealing for retail. Presbyterian Homes is not in the retail business, so perhaps they could use some assistance there to help them to that point. But if this space is converted to residential housing, it's not going to ever be retail again. And the retail market, every market comes and goes. It may be in a slump right now, but who's to say it's not going to come back? We don't know that. People like touching and feeling the products that they're buying. They don't necessarily want to always buy online. So I just I feel, and the other argument is that this can be retail or restaurant, so we can't exclude that as an option in some of the spaces. I just have a really difficult time thinking about letting this PUD amendment go through to allow for residential, knowing the history of this. And the other, one more thing I want to add is just 3 years ago, we revisited converting spaces to uses. Now they can be any use within the C4 district, I think it is, yeah. Except, and this was very intentional, the city council said, except along Superior and Lake Street. And that was just 3 years ago. So I'm very hesitant to recommend approval of this PUD amendment.
Just, and continuing that, like, if you were to unfold this elbow into a linear structure, you have a continuum of residences without any type of retail break, and, you know, we were looking at other projects where they had a coffee shop or something, and they'd go to sort of serve those residents, just an aside, because when we're thinking about creating, activating an area and increasing foot traffic, that is a thing, and that was an intention of this area, so. Paul, anyone else?
I mean, I feel the same way as Commissioner Merriam, is that once this goes retail, it doesn't come back. And I have to feel like Folkestone wanted this to be retail, and so I'm struggling with giving it up.
I would just correct that. I don't think Folkestone had an opinion whether it be retail or not. It was the city that decided.
Okay, so the city, and so I feel like that's part of my job then, is to uphold that in a way. That was the expectation at the time. And I think if you're a boutique retailer coming in, you can't maybe see what that could look like in a big space like this. So I'm not convinced right now that it needs to be residential.
Oh, I have lots of opinions.
Let's go, let's hear them. Let's get them out.
One of the statements in our packet, page 18, spoke to me. It said land use context. It says the 2040 comprehensive plan. Land use designation for the subject property is downtown mixed-use district. The district was specifically created for the promenade development area to reflect the environmental conditions, parcel arrangement, proximity to adjacent uses, and resulting redevelopment challenges. And I think after 17 years, I think we're at the redevelopment challenges stage. And as I said, I was involved in the chamber for many years. I've watched retail. I've lived in this area 50 years, so I've seen a lot of change. Before you were ever born, some of you. But we brought in a consultant, the city and the chamber, and I think Press Homes contributed to it, retail consultant, to look at our community when this all came forward. And he talked about critical mass. He also said that when you have a shopping area, people go continuously. The minute there's a break, they stop. We found that as people went along Lake Street, they got to the Peterson property, which are the condos that sit back from Lake Street, the older ones, they stopped. Talk to the Five Swans. They're always trying to get people down to that part of Lake Street because there's a break. Businesses up Minnetonka Avenue where the post office is, there used to be little boutiques there. They would beg to get business up there. That was just a half a block off of Lake Street. You know what I'm saying, yeah. Times have changed in 17 years. And as I said, I probably sat in on 30 meetings, including architecture, and I didn't want all this brown and I'm glad you're looking
Yes.
at that. It's a hard change, it's hard to think about, but you said these look like they could be little boutiques. Well, maybe if the housing market crashes in 10 years, they could be little
Or
boutiques.
10 months?
I mean, we don't know what's ahead, but I think we know, yes, COVID was a setback, but this was starting long before COVID. And I've talked to Becky at the chamber many times about the efforts for I think even though Presbyterian Homes is in the housing business, they hired a retail consultant to lease this. These are not amateurs
For 10 years, right?
for 10 years.
But the 10 years is a long time to hire someone who's been succeeding badly.
But I just talked to the city manager of Maple Grove, who used to be city manager here. They're having the same issues there in their shopping centers up there. It's a changing economy. And that's why I said we have to look at the big picture. It's changing for office, too. People are working from home. Look at downtown Minneapolis.
Consider Calhoun Square, empty.
Oh, my gosh.
Thousands of
And I
people
used to
live there.
love Calhoun
You know, I mean,
Yeah,
Look at the West End.
the West
Yeah.
End.
Yeah.
just because you want retail doesn't mean it will come.
I know. And
Yeah.
people say to me, oh, I love the shops in Wayzata. And then I see the Amazon truck pull up to their house 3 times a week. You know, those are, I think we have to be, I'm very realistic. I'm having seen small business. And for a time there on Lake Street, every small boutique was owned by a woman whose husband had a good job.
That's how we are now, isn't it?
Think about that. Think about that.
Can you say that again?
For a while there were many little small boutiques on Wayzata, on Main Lake Street, owned by women whose husbands had good jobs.
But we still have that, and
Yeah.
that's not,
Yeah.
that's an argument for more retail that we can afford,
Well, but
which is not Lake Street.
property values in Wayzata are so high that the rents are high because the landlords have to pay the taxes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And they're-
no, we are at a point where it's really difficult, but that is a point, right? And there may be changes in that, because at some point, and this is a discussion that's
Yeah.
like, that economists are fighting about right now, so we're not going to solve it.
Yeah.
And,
But I look at the TCF building valued at $10.3 million. The land is $10 million, the building is $300,000. So that tells you a little bit about property values in this community.
but also,
But I'm not going to argue it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, my view is the time is to make a change. We want it to be a successful development.
yes,
People are sick of looking at empty buildings, and it's a negative thing for our community, I think. And I strongly support it.
yeah.
And one of my good friends, a former mayor, made this suggestion 2 years ago. Be the perfect thing for those high ceiling buildings would be loft apartments.
Yeah,
So that's where I stand.
If they were condos for sale, I would be in line. If they were condos for sale, I would be in line for one.
Yeah, me too.
yeah, they definitely look desirable. I mean, my point is that it would have been, it looks desirable for, had the history been different, like all these concerns and valid points, I feel like, I wish that it had a shot to look like that, right? Like this proposed as retail 5 years ago. Like, I wish that opportunity had an opportunity. I wish the timing, which I started out with, that the timing thing, it seems to be a big factor here. I wish it had the opportunity to look as it's proposed here, but for the purpose of retail, and that we experienced that possibility before considering changing it for the very reason that it's been so unsuccessful as a non-appealing frontage. Like, we're not giving credence to the fact that it's been completely unappealing from either a residential or boutique perspective, up to date, at least on the Superior side, because it's just been a dark area. At the same time, there's, this history, and then the unknown, but we do turn it over to a totally different use. I mean, I think we're going to have a very divided outlook here, and I think that's not unanticipated. And I think that the dialogue is really important. And regardless of the approval or denial, I think the applicant does have the possibility, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, to take a denial or an approval with commentary to council for this exact conversation essentially all over again, to a certain extent. But yes, my goodness,
this
have we missed Mr. Sorensen?
We were talking about the success of the project. I mean, the development has been a success, that's for sure. It's brought in a lot of money for the city, but in that stretch, I don't think it's gonna look any different regardless of whether there's residents there or if it's vacant. I think it will look different if there was some vitality with some retail little shops there or restaurants or whatever, little cafes, whatever. I think that's what brings the vitality.
Yeah, and if you lose that, then where's the other opportunity for it? Because at the onset, like all things considered even, timing, the unfortunate path or journey that the applicant has experienced getting here, if you look at this point in time, we're making a decision for the city to sort of, it's for its future, which is a lot of unknowns. So the past is the past to a certain extent here, and we're really going to think about what the intended best use is for and from the city's perspective. Sorry,
But also,
Ken has, I'm gonna stop for 1 second. I'd like to hear Commissioner Sorensen speak. I don't think he's had an opportunity yet, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
well, I thought Mr. Ambrose was pretty eloquent in his comments, especially when he said once in a while, you know, commissioners have to agonize over a decision. I think this is one of those.
Yeah.
You know, originally was not very enthused about taking retail space away and making it living space. But it's so hard to ignore the history here. I mean, we've gone 10 years and with multiple attempts, and I would say probably, you know, pretty valiant attempts to try to fill this space. Got close a few times. And we're still, and always have high vacancies in this area, and it's not getting better. You know, we're taking less than 20%. If it's already 25 square feet we're building out, that was something else. The rest was loading dock. It's taking less than 20% of the original space and making that a conversion from retail to housing. Adding 12 units of housing is a pretty small percent. I mean, a couple of good things if this would happen, you know, the density would go down in the way the city calculates it. Some would say that's a good thing. Intensity would go down. I think that is a good thing. But, you know, you go back to the criteria that we're given, and, you know, we have to look at that. You know, one being is in harmony with the comprehensive plan. And, you know, you could say this is a tweak in some respects, maybe a big tweak, but it's kind of a tweak. It's still a multi-use development project. We're just changing some of the space a bit based on the market conditions. And Commissioner Ilg made a comment that I think I made to someone else earlier today. You know, we all wish it were going to be active retail, but, you know, that's a wish now.
Yeah.
And how long do we wait?
Yeah.
It's been 10 years.
Yeah.
So do we wait? Do we give it more time? You know, I want to be fair to the developer and owner, but, you know, not vary from what we say is important in our comprehensive plan. So, you know, all in all, I think where we are right now it'd be appropriate to make a change in this space. And, you know, I would support it a little reluctantly or a little unhappily, but I think it's probably the right thing.
Well said.
Okay, just one other comment.
Yeah.
It's not just this space that has a vacancy issue.
yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, if you just walk around. And there's other developments coming our way that are going to have significant first floor space at it.
That's-
We know we're going to want, and the city's going to want, we're all going to want active retail space in those spaces. And some of it's pretty significant space. So, you know, I kind of think about the bigger picture where we are here. I think it's appropriate that we would approve this.
Great thoughts.
No, I think the last point is important. You know, we've discussed two projects down on the opposite end of Lake Street that we say we wish there will be retail or services on the first floor. The most recent one, you know, hope for a coffee shop. And I fear we'll get our way on that, and then there'll be empty retail space down there. It's tough business. It's expensive to rent in this city. And you can overbuild retail. I'll say it again. You can overbuild retail. Just because you build it doesn't mean they will come.
Yeah, it's really difficult to discern, right, how that's going to go one way or the other. But you know, your point about the history and sort of just, you know, okay, if it's moved towards retail and it's vacant, you know, we haven't solved anything.
You know,
There's that. Yep, Commissioner Douglas.
When they were looking at redeveloping the Bay Center, we had a study done of our customer area, and it was about 200,000 people, I think. It's several suburbs. And, you know, they were coming from all directions. Well, since then, look at all the retail that's been built. Look at West End, look at Maple Grove. I mean, we used to draw from all those areas. There wasn't much retail. And Bob, you probably remember being on council, these discussions. And now, you know, and there wasn't the big Eden Prairie Mall, and there wasn't, you know, there's been a lot of retail addition, and that was competition. Wayzata was this unique little town where people could come, but now, all of a sudden, people wanted to go to areas where they could get a lot done in a short period of time.
So you're saying that the retail
Shopping,
nature has changed.
It changed, yeah. And I think a lot of it had with two-income households and, you know, time and all of those. And we did a lot of studies when I was at the chamber on this, and we worked with Presbyterian Homes on a study on this, and not when they were developing. And it was really interesting to see the changes. And it's just the nature of the way things have gone the last 10 years. That's part of the problem, too, I think. But that's all I'll say.
That's good thoughts.
I'll just say one last thing. I'm concerned by converting these 12, that it's just going to turn Promenade into all residential. So I'm a little concerned. I don't know if anybody else has that this of Promenade is a pretty prominent space versus more interior spaces, that I think I would be more open to a proposal where the residential housing is more on the interior of Promenade, because now you're taking away a very big corner that could be used for commercial, whether that's a restaurant or a store. Because, I mean, really, when you think about Promenade, you don't really go into it. It's mostly spent on the outside. So I'm just really concerned that losing this is going to mean that Promenade eventually will be sitting here talking about more residential space.
Yeah, I echo that concern, especially the corner unit, which is really unattractive.
And it's really right there, like it's a big.
I mean, you're going to be walking past down up, you know, Hunter Douglas blinds for all the way up to Upper Wayzata. And the goal was to connect Upper Wayzata and Lower Wayzata. I mean, that is the goal of the city, and, you know, and become more pedestrianized. If you create all residences, it's how fast can I get from upper to lower, not what I can experience along the way. And we still have, you know, development opportunities on Upper Wayzata, which are waiting to happen, and that's the gas station, and who knows what's going to go on with Diner Realty over time. We also have the development, the Wells Fargo changing, and we don't really know the impact of how that's going to change, or the demand, quite frankly, it's going to create, pulling more residents from upper up to lower. I hear the history, but I'm also hearing the future. So I'm both anxious and depressed, because that's what you are if you're too much in either of those directions. But I hear the history, but I have concern over the future of Wayzata with Wayzata goals, even withstanding, you know, 10% office vacancy rate in Minneapolis right now. And, you know, even understanding change in shopping patterns. But we're also planning for a city with an intent to the building. So I'm still a little concerned about it as a full-blown residential conversion. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's okay not to have everyone agree on something that's this complex. And I think it's okay to vote where we can, I think we've aired a lot of the thoughts. So maybe, unless there's anyone else who has anything to add.
Chair, our projector just
Has
went to sleep
died.
for the night, and I
Oh.
don't think we'll be waking up again.
Okay, wonderful.
Apologize for that inconvenience. We do have a proposed language for a potential motion on page 25 of 63, so page 25 of our packet.
Are you able to put it on our monitors?
No.
Okay, so you'll be able to see it on your monitor. The people in the
Yep.
audience won't be
Under
able to
action
see
step?
anything. Yep, under action steps. So I think, Chair, as you stated, you know, we have some disagreement among the group, but I think it'd be okay at this time if there was a motion that we took a vote on. I can do a roll call if that's helpful. Otherwise, we'll do a voice vote and watch for
I
that.
think it's probably good to do a roll call.
Okay, I can do that.
I think Peggy has a motion.
I'll go ahead. The Planning Commission directs staff to prepare a draft Planning Commission report and recommendation with appropriate findings, reflecting a recommendation of approval on the application of let's see, address,
825 Mill Street.
825 Mill Street, for review and adoption at the next Planning Commission meeting. I did say for approval, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second. Elg.
Elk, thank you, Commissioner Elk. Right, can I, have any further discussion? I would just say to the applicant that I hope you've appreciated the thought we're putting into this, and that we do recognize the timing and the consideration and your, the various factors that are making this a very complex analysis, and that regardless of our decision, you still have, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, the ability to move forward with either approval or denial to council to get further clarity, which this may necessitate. So on that, if we'd like to do a roll call vote.
I can do that. So I'll go down the roll here, starting with Commissioner Schwalbe. You can vote aye or nay on the motion that was for approval. Commissioner Schwalbe?
Aye.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Douglas?
Aye.
Chair Stockton?
Nay.
Commissioner Merriam?
Nay.
Commissioner Severson?
Nay.
Commissioner Elg?
Aye.
All right, we have a split vote. So how does that,
Chair, I believe that motion passes.
passes? Yay!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 4-3. So, as you know, that draft planning report and recommendation will be on your consent agenda at the next meeting. And if adopted, then the application will go on to council with that report and recommendation.
All right, great. Again, thank you very much to the applicant and staff for all that dialogue, to the commissioners. Right. Committee Director Gellner, do you have anything?
Yes, our next meeting will be on November 20th. We'll have this item on the consent agenda with report and recommendation. We'll have one public hearing that evening for 728 Wayzata Boulevard for a variance request for a fence in the front and side yard. The details are on our project webpage if you'd like to view them. Ahead of the meeting, we'll publish the packet shortly before on the Thursday prior of the meeting. I don't know if we'll have any December meetings right now. I don't have any upcoming applications that need to be reviewed in that timeline. I think most likely, unless an application comes in very quickly, that we most likely would cancel both December meetings and meet again in January. The council did adopt the 2024 city calendar. I can email that to you. It's also was in the October 24th council agenda if you'd like to see it as soon as possible. So you can save your dates for 2024. And that's all I have for you.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you, everybody, for your participation in this evening's meeting. This concludes our agenda. May I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Douglas.
Commissioner Miriam, would you like to second?
I will second that, yes.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the November 6th, 2023 Wayzata Planning Commission meeting is now adjourned.